Happy Lesbian Visibility Week, guys, from me, your resident lesbian booktuber. Of course, I was going to make a video about 10 lesbian books to read in Lesbian Visibility Week. Or not in Lesbian Visibility Week, that'd be really impressive. But just 10 lesbian books that I think you should read. I make a lot of sapphic book content on this channel, just focusing generally on women loving women of any kind. No, today we're focusing solely on the lesbians. As a lesbian, I love it. Lesbian Visibility Week always makes me laugh, like celebrating it myself, because I always joke that I am the least visible lesbian in the world, like maybe an invisible lesbian, because people just do not believe me when I tell them I'm a lesbian. Like, I can tell somebody to their face that I am gay, like gay as hell, so lesbian, and they will still ask me if I have a boyfriend. Like, there's just something about all this that just doesn't compute with people, and yes, that has caused many a problem in my dating life. Like, I was chronically single. Like, I couldn't get to grips with my own lesbianism because people didn't believe when I told them that I am gay. I know I look like this. I'm just a little femme, okay? But I have short nails. I wear the rings. I have a nose ring, for God's sake. Like, I try. I was literally in the Stonewall Inn, as in like the birthplace of the gay rights movement, the modern gay rights movement, on Saturday night with my fiance, my female fiance, and she told us off to go to the toilet, and I'm sat there just vibing with my drink, having a little boogie in my chair. And this gay guy comes over to me, and like, he was really drunk, I'll give him that, he was really drunk. But he looks me dead in the eyes and he goes, "Why are you here?" And I said to him, I was like, "Oh, I'm just here with my fiance, like having a drink, like, why are you here?" And he was like, "Oh, where is he? Where is he? I'm in the Stonewall Inn at 1 AM on a Saturday night. Like, give me some credit that I could be gay. Like, at least just don't gender. Just be like, oh, where are they, if you're unsure? Where is he?" I was offended. And then we just like chit chat for a couple of minutes. And then he asked me again, like, where is he? Like, what does he do? Like, why are you here? And like, he couldn't get into his head that I am a lesbian woman and I am there with my lesbian fiance, having a drink because we are gay, and it's Stonewall. It's also where we got engaged last year. Like, we literally got engaged in Christopher Park out the front of Stonewall because I'm a massive history nerd and Holly chose like the perfect place to propose. What more do I have to do? Just help me. Anyway, you didn't click on this to hear about my struggles in lesbianism. You are here to hear me talk about 10 books, 10 lesbian books that I think you would enjoy, and I have a great list for you. I'm really happy with this list. I've tried to mix up from the usual books I talk about because I'm sure people don't want to hear me talk about Delilah Green Doesn't Care for the millionth video in a row. So we're going to start with a book that I literally... Oh, where's it gone? Where did my book go? What the hell? Oh, it's over here. It's here. This is a book that I literally read on the flight home from New York. I literally flew overnight a couple of nights ago and I stayed awake for 26 hours. So if I'm a bit out of sorts, that is why. Like, I slept solidly for 11 hours last night and I'm still not caught up. This is Rubyfruit Jungle by Rita Mae Brown. I've had this book on my to-read list for so long. I've had so many of you tell me to read this book, and honestly, I didn't, because classic literature just scares me a little bit. I used to read so much classic lit when I was like literally a preteen. I read Pride and Prejudice when I was like 10, 11 years old, and I loved it. It's still one of my favourite books ever, but as I've got older, classic lit has just really scared me. I'm so glad I read this. This is so funny. It's such an easy read. Like, I genuinely laughed out loud whilst reading this multiple times, and that never happens. One thing I will say though is this was written in 1971. If you're reading this through a 2024 lens, there are parts of it that are going to have you literally clutching at your pearls. Like, by a 2024 lens, parts of this are so problematic. If you've read it, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But if you're reading it through a 1971 lens, like when this came out, and you bear in mind how groundbreaking this book was, you will really, really enjoy it. Our protagonist here is Molly Bolt, and she is genuinely now one of my favourite book characters ever. She is so vivacious and full of life and so, like, unscared. Like, this woman is just, like, not scared of anything. Like, she is so loud and proud and happy to be who she is. And considering she was a character growing up in, like, the 1950s and 1960s, and she is an out and proud lesbian, like, that must have been so refreshing for lesbians of the 70s to read. She was raised in the South by her very extremely poor adoptive parents, and her mum had a very tumultuous relationship, I could say. Like, her mum just didn't really seem to want to have a kid, but it was the done thing at the time, so she adopted this kid when her and her husband couldn't produce one on their own. And her mum just wasn't really set up to be a mother and really had this idea of like what she wanted her daughter to be. And Molly just never was that. And I feel like this book, in between all the lesbianism and all the gay stuff, is bookended by Molly's relationship with her mother. And it's actually quite touching. I don't want to ruin the ending, but the ending, it kind of all comes full circle. And I really, really love that. You follow Molly from when she's literally a toddler all the way through to like her mid-20s. And from day one, it is so clear that Molly Bolt is a character with convictions. Like, she knows who she is and she is not going to change for anyone. And again, 1970s, like, that is really impressive. Like, she decided from a very young age she wasn't going to marry a man. She was going to live life how she wanted to. She wants to be a lawyer or a film producer or film director, I think it is. And she is going to do that no matter what society tries to throw at her. Throughout her teenage years, Molly experiments with her sexuality. She sleeps with boys and with girls and realises that she's not really interested in boys. But this is kind of a theme that runs throughout the entire book, and it is something that I think is quite controversial in reading reviews of this book, in that Molly identifies as a lesbian. Like, she is an out and proud lesbian, and it says so in words in this book. And you will be shocked at how many books about lesbians never actually use the word lesbian. Like, it's kind of viewed a lot of the time as quite a dirty word. Like, there are certain books in here in which I don't actually know, maybe not in this, yeah, maybe one, but they just don't use the word lesbian, even though it's obvious that that is what they are. In this one, 1970s, Molly is like, I am a lesbian, I'm out and proud, and I'm not going to change for anyone. Some of the thoughts and ideas around lesbianism in this book are very of its time. Like, there's a lot of very strong opinions about like butches and femmes and how Molly hates that sort of idea. And still, I think there are lesbians out there today who still have issues with that idea. There's also what you probably would class today as some like internalized homophobia. But again, 1970s lens, I don't think that's how it was supposed to be viewed at the time it was written. I also read one review on Goodreads in which it says that they were put off by this book because of how Molly is so anti-marriage and so anti-man, and it just like really put them off the character as a whole. But like, that is the whole point. Like, Molly is super anti-marriage, she is super anti-male. Like, she is just not interested. Like I said, she does sleep with men in this book, but it's kind of like a means to an end, not necessarily because she wants to do it. She's kind of just like curious, it's something to do. Like, she's just a very free woman, and I love that in a character. She's such a free spirit. This book depicts Molly as having so many lesbian encounters. Like, I can't even begin to tell you how unrealistic to my life this is. Like, every woman Molly meets just kind of like falls at her feet, and even if they consider themselves straight, she will manage to turn them, which has not been my experience of lesbianism, let's say that. But I do know certain lesbians who do have that power, who like can turn a woman, who like, if a woman is curious, they will come to her and like make that happen. So some people said that was super unrealistic. I don't necessarily think it is, based on my experience with other lesbians in my life. But she's just a badass. Like, I just absolutely love her character. I did dog ear a page. Don't be mad at me. Yes, I dog-eared it. I didn't have a bookmark on me. So Paulina is this older woman, and it says, the wine went directly to Paulina's tongue, and she told me how freaked out she was and how secretly she thought lesbianism attracted and frightened every woman, because every woman could be a lesbian, but it was all hidden and unknown. Did I just get into it because of the allure of the forbidden? She then went on to say what a wonderful relationship she had with her husband. They had an understanding about Paul. Paul is another man that Pauline was sleeping with. And wasn't heterosexuality just grand? It bores me, Paulina. Bores you? What do you mean? I mean, men bore me. If one of them behaves like an adult, it's cause for celebration. And even when they do act human, they still aren't as good in bed as women. Maybe you haven't met the right man, Paulina says. Maybe you haven't met the right woman, and I bet I've slept with more men than you have, and they all work the same show. Some are better at it than others, but it's boring once you know what women are like. And then later on the same page, Paulina accuses Molly of using blatant lesbian propaganda, and Molly says, propaganda. If you want to see blatant propaganda, then look on the ads in the subways, magazines, TV, everywhere. The big pigs use heterosexuality and women's bodies to sell everything in this country, even violence. Like, this was written in 1971. Like, why is it still the same today? Oh, I just absolutely adored this. I just love this book so much. There isn't loads in terms of plot. It's definitely more of a character study. Also, at one point, Molly moves to New York City, and reading this on the plane home from New York City after wandering the West Village for like 4 days, and Molly moves to the West Village. Like, it was just so vivid and bright, and I could just see it all. And I have a soft spot for anything gay written about New York City. Like, it is just, There's just like a really specific interest of mine that's like queerness and New York, like that intersection. It gets me every time. This book, I adored it. Book 2 is Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield. This is, it's often touted as a horror novel. I don't think this is horror at all. This is definitely more sci-fi, and I am not a sci-fi girly. I actually didn't read this for a really long time because I just cannot get on board with sci-fi books. But hear me out, this is like, it's kind of written through this really hazy lens. There's not really explanations for a lot of things that go on in this book, which I would usually find so frustrating. But there's so much tenderness in the relationship between the two main characters here. You're dealing with married couple Miri and Leah in this book, and Leah is a deep sea marine biologist, which means for weeks at a time, months at a time, she goes down in a submarine to the sea floor, and that's how their relationship is. Like, Leah goes away for weeks at a time, Miri waits at home for her. And then one day, Leah goes away on one of these expeditions and the submarine just never really resurfaces. And Miri's trying not to panic, like sometimes these things do run over, but every time she tries to get in contact with like the company that sent Leah down there, they're very like, they don't really ever give her any answers. And you don't ever get any answers as to what's going on with that company. That's one of like the more frustrating things about this book, I suppose. But in reading interviews with Julia Armfield about this book, because I was obsessed with it and I read so many interviews afterwards because I just wanted to like learn everything I could, that was kind of the point. Like, it was meant to be the unanswered. That's the whole point of this book. So Leah just disappears on this mission and she doesn't come back, and Miri has to get used to the idea of like being a widow. Like, she has made peace in her mind with the fact that Leah is dead, she's long gone, she's never coming back, and she's probably never going to get any answers. And then one day, Leah does come back, like the submarine resurfaces and all is fine, or so it seems. Because when Leah comes back, she is literally a shell of the woman she used to be, and Miri has to quite literally watch her day by day disappear in front of her eyes. Remember, this is sci-fi, this is not like a realistic book. Leah is literally disappearing. She is slowly like descending into nothing, and all Miri can do is watch and wait for it to happen. After she's already grieved the fact that her wife is gone, her wife comes back and she has to grieve that all over again. And it's the juxtaposition between the chapters of the before and the after. Like, you'll see the before of their relationship, them loving each other so much for this beautiful, beautiful queer love, followed by this really sad chapter in which Leah is just disappearing and Miri's falling apart. I actually screenshotted a part of this interview that Julia Armfield did with them, and it talks about how intentional Julia was in her representation of queerness and queer couples in this book, particularly lesbian couples, and she's very insistent on the fact that they are lesbians. They're not just queer, they're not bisexual, like they are lesbian women in a relationship with each other. The interviewer asked, there's this quote I love from the book about how every couple loves discussing their personal mythology. It really resonated with me. Do you think that's a uniquely queer experience? Julia said, I don't know if it's necessarily a queer thing. It's definitely something that most of the queer people I know do. I guess it's nice as queer people to own our relationships in a different way because we are not sorted through traditional milestones in quite the same way as straight people. Obviously, we can get married, we can have children, we can do all those things, but all of it is slightly more matter of effort and choice. And therefore, I think general mythology and our own milestones are things that actually make our relationships become much more our business. It reminds me of a conversation that me and my fiance had with a friend not so long ago, in which we were talking about how we're kind of like on the fence a little bit about having children. Obviously, it's not something that's in our immediate future, but it's something we're discussing for the future. And the friend said, you should never ever have children unless you're 100% sure that it's something that we really, really want to do. And it kind of really bothered us at the time because we were like, straight people have children all of the time by accident. Like, straight people can just, they have the ability to accidentally fall pregnant and they can make that decision to keep that child or not. And they haven't gone into that 100% choosing to have that child, but they do it and they can be incredible parents even though they haven't 100% chosen to do it. I mean, like, when we decide to have kids, through whatever medium we decide to do it, probably through adoption, maybe not, maybe, we will have gone into that 100% sure that that is what we want to do. Like, there's no umming or ahhing. Like, we're going to have to go through, we're going to have like government officials come to our house and pry apart every aspect of our lives before we're told if we're allowed to have children or not, if we decide to adopt. If we want to do IVF, which I don't think we will, but if we want to, that's going to cost us so much money. But straight people can just do it. They don't have to think about it. They can accidentally do it and still be incredible parents. But for us, that's like a choice that we have to make. Anyway, that's kind of besides the point. But it was just an interesting discussion similar to this. Anyway, Julie Armfield said, so I do think there's something to that. I guess it was important in the narrative as well. Like Miri and Leah were everything to each other. It's so important to me that it was specifically a lesbian relationship because I've had people very, very kindly and with absolutely the best intentions be like, the story worked really well because the romance is really universal. And it's like, that's nice, but the whole point is that it's not. Because there's a specific way of existing in the world as lesbians. There's a specific way of communicating with bureaucracy, trying to deal with hospital health things. That is all much more specific if you were two women in a relationship. And that is something that just really resonated with me. And there is something about this book that I feel like I loved more than if it would have been about straight people, because I felt it. Like, I understood the way that Miri and Leah felt about each other. There's a quote in one of Miri's chapters in which she's talking about her love for Leah that says, I want to explain her in a way that would make you love her, but the problem with this is that loving is something we all do alone and through different sets of eyes. It's nearly impossible, at least in my experience, to listen to someone telling a story about their partner and not wish they get to the point a little faster. Okay, so you're saying he likes long walks, you're saying she's a Capricorn, skip to the end. It's easy to understand why someone might love a person, but far more difficult to push yourself down into that understanding, to pull it up to your chin like bedclothes and feel it settling around you as something true. And that just, I don't know, it just really resonated with me. I adored this book. There's also this, it says, I like the idea of living in the city, but I think it's just because I hate the idea of being anywhere where I can't immediately locate any other gay people. And living in a a rather large town with no gay scene whatsoever. Lordy, I feel that. If you want something a little bit lighter though, the Falling in Love montage by Kira Smith is just chef's kiss, beautiful. It's YA and it actually feels like it's written for teenagers, about teenagers. Like sometimes you read YA and you can tell it's written by an adult. Everything Kira Smith writes, it feels like a teenager's writing it. I don't have as many introspective, interesting thoughts about this book because it is just a fluffy YA rom-com, but sometimes that is exactly what you need. So our characters here are gay girls, are lesbians, are Saoirse and Ruby. Saoirse, I'm very sure is a lesbian, very, very sure. Ruby, I can't actually remember if she identified as lesbian or bisexual, or if it even comes up in the book at all. But Saoirse is this kind of like rebellious teenage girl in Ireland. She's going through a lot in her private life at home, and she is not in the situation where she wants to be in a relationship. Like, she just cannot handle being in a relationship at all. But she's kind of missing that intimacy, having somebody to be really close to. And that is where Ruby enters. Ruby is visiting Ireland from her parents' house in England for the summer. She's staying with her aunt and uncle, I think. And they decide to have this one summer together where they just live life like they're in a rom-com. And so they write a list of all like the cliche rom-com moments, like going to a drive-in movie, or like, I can't remember any other examples. Wait a sec. Here we go, there's literally a list. Fun fair date, meaningful eye contact, one person teaches the other a skill, karaoke, frolicking, performing a synchronised dance routine, passionate kissing in the rain, like all of these really cliche rom-com moments. And they decide they're going to spend a whole summer ticking all of these off their list. And of course, in the end, they end up falling for each other, only Ruby is still going back to England. So what are they going to do? I love this book so much. It's one of these YAs I know I'm going to read again because it just gave me such a like light, happy, hopeful feeling. I love queer books, but a lot of the time queer books have a lot of trauma to them. Like, being queer sometimes comes with a lot of trauma. Hopefully less as the years go by, but it can be really, really difficult. And a lot of books tend to focus on that trauma, especially when they're sort of written through the lens of a straight person. But sometimes it's wonderful just to have queer joy, where there's no trauma, there's no parents not accepting you. It's just queer love. And that's what this book is. Although talking about trauma, let's talk about the Miseducation of Cameron Post, which pretty much epitomises queer trauma in one book. You have Cameron Post, it's 1989, and she is discovering that she likes girls. A girl, one girl in particular, Coley, and they spend this one summer together, like they really fall for each other. But then Coley's parents find out, and Coley immediately outs Cameron to save herself, and Cameron is outed to her very ultra-religious aunt who she's living with, and the aunt wastes no time in sending her to a conversion camp. My battery just ran out and I have no idea where I was when I left, so back to this book. It's just really beautiful. The tender love story between Coley and Cameron is so heavily juxtaposed by the almost violence of the conversion camp, like how it's just really, really painful the second half of the book is to read. And I think what makes it worse is the fact that this was real. Like, this story, this conversion camp story, happened to so many people. It's still happening to so many people in America and worldwide. And the ending of this book, it does have hope in it, but it's still not a happy ending. And if you do want a book about queer trauma, about the real life struggles of queer people throughout history, this is a beautiful one to read. And more queer struggles, we have Last Night at the Telegraph Club by Melinda Lowe. I have spoken about this book more times than I can possibly count, but this is one of my favourite sapphic lesbian books of all time. I read this book about a year and a half ago now, maybe even 2 years ago, and I have thought about it every single day since. This is the story of 17-year-old Lily Hugh. She lives in San Francisco in the 1950s, 1954, and she is of Chinese descent. She is a third-generation Chinese living through the Red Scare, so she has a lot of responsibility on her shoulders to not mess up. Because if she draws any attention to her family, negative or even positive, they could all be deported. Despite the fact they're third generation, they were born and raised here, her father is just terrified that he is going to get deported. So when 17-year-old Lily begins to come to the realisation that she doesn't feel about boys the same way her friends do, it's a really, really scary time for her. But despite that fact, despite the fear, she can't deny who she really is. And when she meets Kath and they have this undeniable connection and Lily feels so strongly towards her, she's not able to stop it. Like, it just shows how innate sexuality is. Like, you can't stop it, you can't stop your feelings. It's going to happen to you no matter what the consequences are. And that is why conversion camp is bullshit. Going back to the other book. This is a coming of age story in a time where it wasn't legal to be gay. Lily is 17 years old, it's 1954, and she is discovering the queer community as it was back then, and that included the Telegraph Club, which was a queer club in San Francisco. And she goes there, even though she's underage for one, and that club shouldn't exist for two, she ends up going on a regular basis with Kath, and she meets this wonderful queer community. And I found myself at points in this book being really jealous because I don't have that queer community and I would love it. And although it was so hard for Lily and it was such a horrible time, she still found community. She still found people that she loved and could relate to her. And as we all know, queer bars in this time would quite regularly be raided by the police, and one night Lily is in the bar and it gets raided and everything is kind of destroyed in that moment. I won't say any more because I really don't want to give this away, but this is just a wonderful book. It explores the queer community, it explores the 1950s, it explores the Red Scare. There are so many different layers to this book and I would just highly, highly recommend it. Of course, I can't talk about Lesbian Visibility Week without talking about The Colour Purple by Alice Walker. This is another classic and I can't believe it took me so long to read it because I only read it about a month ago, and the lesbianism in this book is just so innate. And I actually watched the movie The Colour Purple, the new one, the musical movie, on the flight over to New York. And I was actually quite upset by the movie. Like, the movie itself was really good, and I think if I hadn't read this book, I would have enjoyed it a lot more. But they redact the lesbianism. Like, the love story between Celie and Shug in this book is so beautiful, and it's just not done justice in the movie at all. It's actually like the director kind of wanted to omit it completely. Like, let's hint at the lesbianism, but let's not fully go in, it feels offensive to Alice Walker, to what she wanted to get across in this book, because lesbianism is a part of who Celie is. Like, she is a lesbian. She is a young black woman living in the South in sort of the era of segregation, and she is dirt poor. Like, she is so poor. And this book, I struggled with it at first because it's written in Celie's voice, and it took me a while to sort of like understand it. There were certain words I just couldn't figure out what they meant. Obviously very British, reading a book written in a Southern American accent, like it took a minute. But once I was in it, I was in it. And it's just about Celie's struggles in life. She is married off to this horrible man who you don't actually find out his surname at any point. He is just called Mr. She's married off to this horrible man who just abuses her. As a child, she was raped by her own stepfather, who she thought was her biological father. She ended up having 2 children by her stepfather. They are sent off to like be adopted by another family. And when Celie gets married to Mr., he originally wants to marry her sister, who is called, oh my god, what is her sister called? Nettie. I was thinking Hattie in my head, Nettie. He originally wanted to marry Nettie. When Nettie said no and he married Celie instead, Celie was told that she couldn't see Nettie anymore. So she is separated from her sister, she's separated from everyone she loves, and she's just in this really, really difficult position in life where she is a woman. She's got no power whatsoever, and she has no attraction towards her husband. Like, she talks about how he gets on top of her and they have sex, and there's no feeling there for her. She doesn't care for it at all. And then she meets Shug Avery, who is the woman that Mr. wanted to marry. She is this singer, she's very much a free spirit, and she ends up moving in with Mr. and Celie. And Celie falls for her, and Shug falls for her right back, and for the first time in her entire life, Celie feels what it is to be loved, to be attractive, to like have somebody want her in the way that she wants them. And their love story is just so beautiful and so tender, and I'm so angry at the movie for omitting that pretty much entirely. It made me so angry. We're not talking about the movie, we're talking about the book. It's just a really beautiful love story, and no point in the book is the word lesbian used. Like, Celie is not like written as a lesbian in this book, but again, it's a classic, it was written a long time ago. It's very much like Alice Walker meant for the lesbianism, like it's meant to be in it. There's a lot of discussion around it, like whether Alice Walker intended for Celie to be a lesbian or if she just had this one connection with Shug. And a lot of the time with literature like that is just about how you as a reader perceive it, and I perceive it. The only person she ever had romantic feelings for was Shug. She talks about how she is just not attracted to men. She doesn't get it. She doesn't understand how people can be attracted to men. I love this book so much. It's a classic for a reason. I could literally make a whole video like talking about and analysing this book. I might even do it because there's just so much to say. There are so many different layers to it. Like, lesbianism is just one layer. It's about her being a woman. It's about her being black, and like all these things which makes her downtrodden in society. My camera just cut out again. We're not having much luck with this video, but beautiful book. The Lesbiana's Guide to Catholic School by Stonewall Reader. Just look how beautiful this book is. Look at those sprayed edges. Oh, gorgeous. In this book, you have 16-year-old Yami. This is a YA book, but it's a YA book, but it can be enjoyed by any age. Like, I truly believe that anyone can pick up this book and like understand it and feel all the emotions in it. This is the story of 16-year-old Yami, who was recently transferred to a Catholic school where she is tasked with the job of overseeing her younger brother. Her younger brother is super smart and he's just acting out a lot. So they've gone to this new Catholic school from public school. And Yami is quite relieved at this change because she has recently been outed as a lesbian at her public school. So she's like, I'm going to go to this Catholic school and I'm not going to tell anyone I'm gay. I'm going to stay in the closet. Like, I just want to get through school and then I can live my life. Only it doesn't really work out that way when she gets a crush on one of her schoolmates. The schoolmate in question is Bo. She is super out, super proud, very loud about who she is. And so Yami's in this really awkward position. She's like, if I get too close to Bo, then I'm automatically outed. But I really, really like this girl. But that is just one layer of this story. This has so many different layers to it. You have her mum, who's super poor, like really struggling to like keep the family together. She's spending everything they have on sending the children to the school to make them better themselves, and she is so scared that her mum's going to reject her because of her sexuality. Then she's got her dad, who was actually deported, and the only way she keeps in contact with her father is through FaceTime, and eventually she comes out to him and things don't quite go as she planned, and she's got so much pressure on her shoulders to keep everyone happy and to be able to like look after her brother, and he is going through so much stuff and she's going through so much stuff. And there's just like, this is written for a young adult audience, but it is really, really heavy. Oh, and I forgot to mention there's another layer of her being one of the only Latinas at a very white, very Catholic school, and like she's also dealing with that on top of everything else. This is one of my favourite YAs I've ever read in my life. We gotta have some smuts in this video. I can't get through a Lesbian Visibility Week video without talking about lesbian sex, of course. And for that, we've got Cleat Cute by Meryl Wilsner. I have recently heard that Megan Rapinoe is making a TV show of this book with her new production company, which is going to be amazing. If you're a football lesbian, this is one for you. Our main characters in this are Grace and Phoebe. Grace is this sort of like tenured soccer player on the USA national team and on the New Orleans team as well, which I can't remember what it's called. But she is like this tenured soccer player. And this new girl joins the team called Phoebe, and Phoebe is super out, super proud, very ADHD. She is like not quiet about who she is in the slightest at all, and she is kind of like the antithesis of Grace in so many ways. Like, they are completely opposite people. But you know what they say? opposites do attract, and they find themselves in this very steamy relationship. Like, straight off the bat, there's no, like, getting to know each other, there's no, like, fancying each other. They're just having sex. Very steamy, very hot sex. Mary Wilsner, she can write those steamy scenes like no other. There's also Mistakes Were Made by Mary Wilsner, and it's amazing. I've just realised I said she. I was actually told recently that Mary Wilsner is non-binary, so they can write sex scenes like no other. They decide to keep it casual, keep it cool, like they're coming up to the World Cup. They don't want anything to distract them, of course. Only it's a romance book, so you can guess what happens. They do kind of start to get feelings for each other. But like I said, they're very opposite people. They deal with things in very, very opposite ways. And I think I've got a personal connection to this book because Phoebe very much reminds me of my fiancée Holly, and Grace very much reminds me of myself. And yeah, there's not loads to say about this. Like, this isn't the kind of book that's going to change your world. But if you're a football lesbian or a football lesbian lover, this might change your world. It might. I have seen some criticism of this book with people saying, like, there's no plot to it, nothing really happens, which I could see that, But if you're just in it for the steam, what can I say? This one might be a bit controversial because this has got absolutely terrible reviews on Goodreads. Like, the reviews of this book are so bad, but I unironically really, really love this. Sorry, my chair keeps squeaking, it's very annoying. This is Diette by Jenny Fran Davis, and this book is just... it's insane. This book is insane. Like, it is unhinged, and I loved it. I always really struggle to, like, explain what this book is about because, like I said, it is absurd, it's unhinged. So I'm just going to read out the blurb for you. Sarah and Jesse are passionately dysfunctional 20-somethings making a life together in Brooklyn. When a pair of older, richer lesbians, a prominent news host and her psychotherapist girlfriend, invite Sasha and Jesse to their country home for the holidays, they're quick to accept. But the trip includes a third couple, Jesse's best friend Lou and their cool girl Flame Darcy, whose social clout Sasha ridicules but also desires. As the late December afternoons blur together in a haze of home-cooked feasts and sweaty sauna confessions, so too do the guest secrets and shifting motivations. It's described as an irresistibly modern love story at the crossroads of queer nonconformity and seductive normativity. Sasha, being the narrator in this book, is just completely unlikable as a character. Like, she sucks. She is like all of the worst things about humanity. But you are in her head, so you're kind of getting the untouched version of events. Like, it is just a stream of consciousness. Like, every thought that Sasha has is written down in these pages. And isn't anyone unlikable if you're inside their heads? Like, if you don't have a filter, anyone can be unlikable. And I feel like that is kind of maybe what Jenny Fran Davis was trying to get at in this book. Like, it's just her in her mind. She doesn't always act on the thoughts that she has, but she does have some pretty terrible thoughts. Sasha's this super femme girl who just wants to be cool. She wants to be liked so badly, but just doesn't really have the personality for that. And she's in a relationship with Jesse, who is sort of gender non-conforming. Jesse is sometimes referred to as her boyfriend, sometimes girlfriend, sometimes he, sometimes she, which can make for a bit of confusing reading. I'm not going to lie, I was a bit confused in the first chapter because Sasha's referring to her girlfriend but then using he, him pronouns, but you do get it eventually. It's just like very different from what you usually expect in lesbian love stories. Sasha does identify herself as a lesbian despite the fact that Jesse is non-conforming. It does make you like, it asks a lot of questions, this book, and it doesn't really provide any answers, but it's really, really thought-provoking. Like, Sasha in this book absolutely hates Darcy, who is the girlfriend of Lou, Jesse's best friend, hates Darcy so much. And so you, as the reader, also begin to hate Darcy. But do you just hate Darcy because you're only hearing Sasha's version of events? Like, is Darcy as terrible as Sasha might lead you to believe? You don't know. You never find out. This is just a super messy book. There are portions of it which make no sense at all, and I can't put in words why I enjoyed it so much, because on paper, this is a book that I just would not enjoy. I just did. I have no explanation for you. It's messy, it's really gritty, it's offensive at points. I really enjoyed it. It's really thought-provoking. I think this quote on the back kind of sums it up perfectly. The only thing more horrifying than perceiving oneself is being perceived by others. And that is how I feel every day about life. And the final book I want to recommend is not one that I have physically, and nor is it one that is technically or at all a lesbian novel, but it is a book which I think is so important for every queer identifying person to read, and that's The Stonewall Reader by the New York Public Library, which is basically this anthology of essays written by all sorts of different people before, after, and during Stonewall. It's about the Stonewall riots and sort of like how it all intersected, all these different people's versions of events, and it's really, really interesting because, as with so much of history, there's all these different versions of events and none of them quite match up with each other, and everyone's got this different idea of what happened that day. There are essays in there or interviews in there by trans folk, by gay men, by gay women, by lesbians, by stone butchers, and it's brought us up to this point today where queer people have more rights than ever, but also the rights are being stripped away faster than ever as well. And I know it's not a lesbian novel, I know, that's what you came in here for. But I think it's so important, more so now than ever, to know our history, to know the people that came before us. And The Stonewall Reader is just the best way to do that. I listened to it on Audible. I think it's available on all like audiobook platforms. It's probably on Spotify now. They have the audiobooks for free, 15 hours a month. Highly, highly recommend you listen to it. It was eye-opening. Like, it's literally changed my view completely on Stonewall and on how that night happened and everything that happened after and before. Oh, it was amazing. Please read it if you want to know a piece of your own history, because we are only here today because of the people that came before us. Like, I'm only here able to say out and proud that I'm a lesbian and make this video because of all the wonderful lesbians that came before and fought for that right. Spoken like a true history nerd. And with that, I'm going to say goodbye because I'm pretty sure this video has been very long and my camera battery is flashing at me. Again, I was not prepared to make this video, clearly. Do a better job in future, Georgia. Why not? Please comment down below your favourite lesbian book. I want to add as many as I can to my list. I want to read them all. I want to read every single lesbian book that has ever existed. Is my mission in this life. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. And subscribe. If you're here, subscribe. I make lesbian content all the time, and if you clicked on this video, I assume you like lesbian content. I guess. Right, mwah, love you, bye.